Hello? Hello? Okay. I always forget to plug some stuff somewhere. All right, guys and gals, and anyone that's interested. Honestly, I really like the participation that we have when we go live and do some programming. So today, we're going to continue the workbench. We've been basically doing this. I started doing it a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week or two. And then I've been moving around to security, to computer building, to AI, just a constant back and forth. I like to go different subjects attributed to my ADHD. I like to focus on one thing thoroughly, and then at some point, normally I've noticed about 2 hours in, I decide to take a complete turn and do something else technical. So now we're going back to the workbench. We're going to go review a little bit about basically setting up a local working environment to learn, to kind of work with a piece of code that is your own and to be able to understand a couple of factors when it comes to the GUI that we interface with and the connection to the backend. So we'll take a bit of going over, recalling where we were before, but here's kind of the setup we have right now. We've got the page open. It's a local file in my hard drive, and its location is right there. You can see it. Uh, and it is an HTML file. We do, and we will go into even further concepts. For instance, I have a whole set of um, games that are good for essentially training your brain, increasing your cognitive abilities. And this is another place that I want to go to in the future once we get into PHP and MySQL to actually manage stuff like scoring systems, graphics, but it's going to take some time because those are the 85% outside of the beginner's scope of learning. And we basically want to go a little bit further into the development and understanding the basics until we get to there. So it's going to be an ongoing process. We're going to learn everything from creating efficient code. That's the first key here. We want to create efficient code. Oh, hey. Oh, hey, hey, hey. Now I've been kind of on and off. So it's all right if you didn't make it last time. I've actually been, give or take, back and forth between students and stuff. But let me see. It's really tiny. Let me, the chat's really tiny. Very, very tiny. Where be? Where be sources? There they are. Oh, but let's see what you said. Hey, my PC got broken while adding RAM. What happened to your PC? How did it break when you were adding RAM? Did you mix RAM types? Make sure that they are of the same hertz value? Okay. All right. Yeah, how did you ooh, I hope you didn't force anything. Whenever you're working with a PC, you never want to like put force. You want to let it just kind of slide into a socket or lift it out. If it doesn't lift out automatically, there's something that's locked in and preventing it from moving. So you got to make sure you remove any hatches or anything that basically gets in the way. So be very careful uh when you're getting inside your PC. You got to be very delicate when you're modifying and opening up devices. When I was little, I used to basically take apart all kinds of stuff from remote controls to radios to whatever, just to practice, just to make sure I can take it apart and put it back together. That was the goal. No, the motherboard broke it. Any idea how it broke on the motherboard? Was it it could also crack based on the pressure if you don't let things kind of slide in. It could overheat, but not due to RAM. It could What should I do for GPU? Money is no word. GPU, if money is not a problem, I mean, what do you want to do with it? If you want to play games, 3070, perfect. If you want to run a local AI, like a base model, a 4080 would be great with 16 gigabytes. But if you want to train your own personal AI, you're going to be spending on a H100, which is about 48 gigabytes of VRAM, I believe. And you can train your own models, you can distill them, you can kind of create your own custom AI, but that card is like, I don't know, three or $4,000. I don't even know how much it is on the market right now. But it really depends on what you want to do. For gaming, it's pretty straightforward. You just need like 8 GB minimum. 5090s, there were some charts that I didn't like, and they were from Gamers Nexus, 1590 comparison, and it wasn't too far off from the previous models. Let's see what this was about. So I guess we're going to divert a little bit into hardware now. Since it was requested by chat, I'm always happy to talk with and communicate with and chat with chat, as that is what it's for. Let's see. So we're looking at, there's a 5090, 1% average FPS, low. Looking at 4090 versus 50. Yeah, look, 4090 to 5090, not that big of a difference, 3%. And average FPS, you got to consider, is it using fill-in frames? I'm not sure if it's using fill-in frames. Oh, the advisor skill. Okay, Sapphire, the 4080, it's literally like 7 percentage points off. What's the price difference? Jeez, 5090. 1590, 1200. Okay, that's basically the same Damn, his comparison got very popular. Let's see, where's the good ones? Not the user benchmark, but that's a good one too. There's another website that compares these directly. Yeah, it's like half the price. I mean, I'm in a different currency right now, but this is about $800. This one's about 2,000. No, 1,500. So you're looking at a pretty big difference, twice the price difference for like 7% difference. And even then, like benchmarks are pretty heavy up here, concentrated, versus this one's kind of dependent on other hardware. You can see it's kind of span out. A lot of people are bottlenecked with the 5090. They don't seem to have the correct rest of their hardware, so they're kind of getting lower scores down here. Uh, Potentially with RAM bottlenecks and stuff. Yeah, well, for $1,000, you're probably not looking at a 5090. You can again stay with a 4080. Mm, 4070, pretty big drop there. You're looking at the 1% low, really. Like you can do the high average to fair enough, like the average of the highest value. But I look at the lowest case scenario. So 87, oh no, 85.5 on the 4090, and you drop to the 4070, you're getting a 50. So you're a big drop on 4070. But again, it depends on what you need to do. That's unfortunate that your roommate owes you that much money. That doesn't sound like a great roommate. What's up, Fuzzy Bear? How you doing, buddy? Just looking at some graphic card comparisons. Hyboso was looking at some details on upgrading. Yes, sir. So let's get back to it. So I wanted to do a couple of things, right? I've got a basic workbench set up for, in a way, newbies, but we're going to be learning for efficient programming. And I don't know if I'm going to get to it on stream, but I have a set of games that I do online that I have online for my students. If you go to Super Scholar XYZ and then train your brain over here, um, with assistance from AI, I've basically gathered together a couple of things for reading faster, for math skills, and increasing your abilities. For instance, skip count, pick a number, and then you're essentially working with the next value in that number, going through all of the skip counting methods. What it does is it makes you more, um, at least for a lot of students I know in the basic mathematics, between fifth to eighth grade, it helps them out with enjoying a little bit of a process here for learning their mathematics, which can then help with multiplication later down the road, factoring, and a bunch of other factors. But the key is that it basically sets up a database and you can set your scores up. So I wanted to analyze this detail here where I'll show you how APIs work on the back end, how you can connect your main application to access your MySQL database. We'll learn how to set a database up and then how to access it and protect it using PHP. This is a super basic one so far. It's got some basic protections as far as not using any exploitable factors, but the security can be for sure improved. But in the end case scenario, got a bunch of games you guys can enjoy for free. It's basically a couple of tools that I've been playing with over a long period of time, increasing my own reading skills before I went to college. I knew I was going to read a lot of textbooks, so I went from about 200 words per minute and I grinded for about 2 years and I increased that to about 500 to 700 words per minute reading, depending on how much caffeine I've drunk that day. But at that point, it really does become more of a cognitive improvement process. In the games that I've chosen, matching words that are jumbled, finding certain words in a specific area, counting up from 1 to 20 in random order, training your peripheral vision. This is kind of the details, right? Reading vision span, reading memory, and reading speed versus calculation speed, calculation memory, and troubleshooting. All of these are critical thinking skills. Well, minus the actual reading part. But the mathematical ones are the critical thinking processes that we will take to increase our ability to think effectively. And again, critical thinking comes from mathematics. It is a skill set of logic, and being able to use those effectively helps us be more efficient with our thoughts and our planning and processes. So here's the workbench. We'll go through the small details here. Uh, should I put on some music, you guys, or keep it like this? What do you guys think? Any music for you, or is it good the way it is? So the basics of HTML as far as interactions, because this works further into multiple languages, but I like to always repeat how I like to use HTML. Thumbs down on music. All right. Um, I like to show graphical user interfaces with JavaScript and HTML because they're a lot more interconnected than when you're doing, let's say, C++ and anything else involved. When you're doing graphical user interfaces with any language outside of something like a simple document, you're essentially working with API frameworks and you have to code it, hard code the interface using the framework itself. But in JavaScript, it's basically built into the system. We see here, we are kind of moving around different code sets. We have ourselves CSS up here, which is the design factor. This is where all the designers will grind on getting all of the spacing available to make it nice and clean, rounded edges, colors of the text, and all that jazz. I haven't done anything for the button yet. But then you'll see your HTML, which is the structure. This is the actual skeletal structure of your design, not directly related to the actual way it looks, but rather the order in which it appears. So you've got up here CSS design, which one can include something like in a skeletal format if you're thinking human beings, clothing, anything in makeup, all those kind of pieces that would basically show that as far as a human being defined in a page. But then you have the skeletal organization, which is the HTML. I like to always bring in a little bit of synonyms in here. And for the scripting factor here inside of these two tags for script, this is where the real programming happens. Well, when we say real programming, we're talking really specifically about logic. We're talking about logic, no personal information in chat, please. We're talking about logic in any particular case of actual programming, C++ based loops, yeah, just loops in general. They're all got the same sort of like syntax, but this is where the brain, so JavaScript is the brain of the page. So this is how we can really start to organize the different places we're in based on the type of code you see around it. So inside of scripts, we're specifically dealing with JavaScript or the brain of the page. In HTML, we're looking at the skeletal organization of the structure of the page. And then the CSS will be the actual design factor, any colors, any animations. Nowadays, CSS 5 has been improving hella great, and it's been giving us the ability to create actual like animations in a canvas or even without a canvas that basically rivals that of like Flash back in like 2015. We don't even need Flash. We don't even need Java anymore, those little Java containers to actually create interactive pages anymore. So, so far, all we've done is essentially pass through or create a input and a button. Actually, the button's over here. Let's give it some space. So we've got the input for what we're looking for to actually get a command from when we're dealing with any input from the user. This is how all inputs work, right? In this case, we're making a very pure text-based input. We're going to be learning how to parse those strings, how to make sure we can use strings in a more advanced manner so we can not only create a structure for commands being placed inside, but learning how we can separate, structure, and play with strings themselves, because in the end, that's kind of one of the biggest pieces in programming is knowing how to manipulate strings when it especially comes to encryption or any sort of form of um, basically structuring ideas. And you can also consider that that's going to be important when we do PHP, because PHP itself on the server side, currently this we consider the client. This page here is a client. It works locally on the computer, but the server would be the location of the page on the other side of the internet. That's a whole different set of languages, or depending on, you can have one language, you can have multiple, from PHP to Node.js to Python Django. We'll be doing PHP because it's basically like 85-90% of the internet, and basically it's pretty good. I live between the United States and Europe. I am a dual citizen. Not gonna dox me any further than that, but yes, I live in two locations right now. I'm in one of those. So in the case scenario, we have the user input, which is the specific identifier. Anytime you used Astro before, Astro, not sure what Astro is, so probably not. If I divert a little bit, Astro for development. Favorite UI frameworks? Okay, Astro's flexible island architecture extends development with apps and integrations built in. Interesting. Open source? I'm a fan of open source. Ooh, Microsoft's in there. I'm not gonna use that. As soon as I see Microsoft, I'm gonna stray far away from this. JavaScript web framework optimized for building fast content-driven websites. Interesting. Ew. Whoa. There's so many frameworks. There's so many. Okay. With Astro? Don't donate anything, bro. Just support me by watching and having relative questions to what we're doing today. With Astro, web framework for content for websites. What I thought was interesting is on my Linux machine, on the Cinnamon-based user interface, they actually use JavaScript locally on their desktop. So you're seeing this method of using JavaScript because it is such a popular language. It's becoming very prominent. You can create, I mean, even Windows 10, no, Windows 8. Remember that weird start menu that takes up the whole screen that everyone hated because everything is a fucking tablet? That screen itself was also HTML JavaScript based, but you can also use an XML and C++ format. So you had kind of multiple ways to develop it. But nowadays you see a lot of these sort of things happen. I am core should go back to them, I feel, dude. You're in for the treat. Let's see, hold on. What kind of treat? Build the web you want. Okay, so it's an NPM based package. Okay. This is Node Package Manager for Node.js, if anyone doesn't know. It basically is the same feature of like using Python with its pip integration, but for NPM, it uses a repository online to download and install specific libraries, so that's nice. I don't use it too much, but looks fun. Sitemaps, yeah, Alpine. It looks interesting, but it's just a framework that you have to learn on top of actually working it, which can make a lot of stuff easier. Does it have a REST? It probably has a REST API involved in there. REST framework. What can I use as a reference here? Astro build. Astro to build. Oh, no. That seems more of the community support page sponsoring this project. Interesting. I mean, it is JavaScript based, but yeah, maybe futuristically we can go over it. There's a lot, there's so much we can do with JavaScript. I don't want to kind of distract myself from the general queue here. But it is another sense that JavaScript as a general language set is used on a lot of places, not just the web anymore. So it's hella worthwhile. It's hella worthwhile to actually learn JavaScript, how to do your own workbench in the back end. So key scenario, just for the beginners anywhere in chat. We've got HTML setting up the basic page for our actual document. This is the Stream 1 document. And in the head, we only have CSS to kind of basically design what I wanted to do here. Nothing too crazy on the design. It's just basically to keep it a little bit spiffy. Outside of our head, most of our page will be in body. Let me kind of clean this up. We have two pieces of our body. We have a workbench design class, which is a div separator that gives us the ability to outline the location of our page or specific parts. It is a very block-like system. JS has one like Linux. I'm happy. Uh, JavaScript is actually one. What was the original ES script? Was it ES script or something? I'm glad that JavaScript actually made it up to that point where we can use that. And now we can do hardware acceleration with JavaScript as well. So that's even the next step is creating full out games in the browser so we don't even have to download them. Well, you will have to download the client side, right? So that'll be an interesting alternative to gaming on the web browser because now we can actually use hardware acceleration to do that for us, which is pretty spiffy. So in the workbench space, all I'm doing is defining what I want this workbench to look like and be. If I open that up, there's the H1 tag for that particular title, and then the two pieces that make up the workspace, the user input and the button here. So with that in mind, we essentially just create a space for us to input information. We give them identifiers. Either classes or IDs can work. But we need to make sure that we can reference these in JavaScript because these are the ways we communicate back and forth between the HTML space and the brain space, the actual JavaScript itself, right? So being able to basically double click here, you'll see my Visual Studio Code highlight the specific reference being used also right here. User input, user input. Um, Within JavaScript, we have a nice little tool that basically grabs information from our page, like the user input ID and by ID function specifically called get element by ID. That gives us the ability to grab information from that input. So whatever I type in here, I'm able to essentially throw it into a variable and then pass it through our JavaScript to make decisions based on what we input, which is kind of the case here. Now, we did take that input and we did something with a string. Uh, we split it up into pieces so we can modify or analyze each grouping of those pieces. And the way it comes out, I think I still have that visible here in console. Maybe. No, I do not have that, but here's what I can do. One thing we should actually learn about right now is the scope of systems, all right? So here's where a scope happens to be. A scope is a reference to a location of a block of code. A block of code, a reference to the beginning of our curly brace here, to the end of the curly brace down there. Now, a lot of developers will never really use this format because it's just kind of extra space for their reference. But we do like to see the fact that this is connected to this. These two yellow brackets here are connected. You can follow the line to see where that block of code is. So when we talk about scope, we're talking about this location here and how everything inside of here is its own scoped location. Everything inside of this block of code, which is very helpful to reference these values. It's very helpful to understand curly braces as blocks. And when we think of blocks, we have if blocks. You can see one over here to over here, right over here. And then we have a for block as well. So being able to see those curly braces as a block of code relative to what it's portraying is the best way you can analyze and organize yourself on structure. This is for efficient programming, and this is why we use tabs. This is why we use these sort of organizational mannerisms, right? We don't have to use tabs for JavaScript, but it helps us read our code more effectively. So in this case scenario, this whole block of code is named button click. So only variables created inside are referred to as values of that block of code. So this is why if I decide to maybe get user in from the console, it's not available. It doesn't mean it's not there. It just means it's not available to reference because what happens is your particular variable, let's say user in, gets created on this line. You use it a couple of times here, here, just to print it out, and that's about it. The rest is kind of like passing itself over to another variable called command argument, command R. Well, after that use, and we end up at the end of the scope down here, user in due to, and any other variable that's inside of this scope, user in and any other variable within this block of code gets destroyed to save memory. This is a constant use in programming where you want your variables, if they're particularly set in a block of code or a function or a class, they will get destroyed after they're not being used anymore. Very important to always know. And also for the record of basically, you know, structuring yourself effectively and not taking up a bunch of space on the RAM. Now, if I want to take a peek at user in or even any other variable, what I can do, for instance, I want to take a look at command R, I can remove the actual creation of command R, and I can leave that scope to what we call the root space, right? This is the root area that we can basically always view, and I'll create a new case for command R here, and I'll set it as a empty array because that's what this is going to return. I technically don't even have to do this. I can just kind of keep it empty or just create it on the outside scope. Again, if we think about scoping, we got to always remember this is our current space, but I'm writing outside of that block, which is the root location. Another way to think about it is this is the root over here on this very left corner. In fact, we can still tab, right? But in the end, it's outside of that space. Then over here, we have the function for button click. And then over here, we have the if locations and all the internal code that runs under a specific condition for if. And then we have for that will give us another set of loops to go through, or in this case, under that particular set of code, running it a few times based on I, which I is attached to the length of our commands. So understanding this spacing and this organization basically gives us a much more thorough understanding of how all our code can work together. Now, if I wanted to again leak out a variable from the inside of a function and access it outside, I will create the variable outside. So it has a global scope versus the internal function scope. So this would be the button click block of code scope starts here. I'm going to remove this, no need for that for here. We're really focusing on the scopes here. And then once we get to the very end, well, I can even put this at the end here, we have our finalized scope here. Hold on. Sun kind of got out. Uh, get a little light in here. There we go. I am a vampire, so I like the dark. So the scope ends at the end of our block call, and I can always check what the block looks like by just basically closing it with Visual Studio Code and then seeing the beginning and end. Sometimes effective, sometimes not so much. I wish I can just close this little piece here, but that's not going to happen. So that basically closes the function so we can organize our code visually and zoom out a bit. It doesn't make it go away, it just hides. And you can see it by the three dots at the end here, showing you that it's hidden. Always useful. Now I can go in, I gotta save this first, refresh. and then do a command R. Now I have the variable. It's technically empty, but I haven't put any commands in there yet. So test command, allow, press me. So test command has just run, the button click activated the function, and in the case here, on button click is the activator. When we press that button, it runs the function named click, and then runs the code inside, right? But then that's when the code specifically for the split pops up. Sure, I have split and, kind of shown these from the last time we did our sessions online. But if I remove these console logs, now we don't have any output, so maybe we want to see inside. Here now, with the global arrangement, I can take a look at what's happened to that variable. This is also good and bad. This is bad for security breaches. If you're running any JavaScript in the backend trying to manage private information, you never want to have a global scope. You always want to make it into a private space, but even on JavaScript, still a bad idea. You don't want to really put any private data in JavaScript. You want to make it handle, you want it being handled on the PHP server because the server itself is going to be completely isolated from a person's page. Remember, this is a client language. We are working directly on the page that the user is looking at. It downloads everything we do. Here it is. You can see all the code of that page using inspector. This is a bad way if you were deciding to create password verification process, it's very bad to do so in your JavaScript because everything's visible. You will do the verification on the server and pass a token, a randomized token that verifies that person. You would never pass any private data into a browser back from a server, passing it from PHP to JavaScript, right? That's an important factor to remember. Never put anything private in JavaScript. It is always visible, even if you do obfuscation, like making variables look less readable and less helpful. Even then, someone can really take a long time to try and find an exploit on your page by analyzing your JavaScript and basically finding a weakness in it. So I've now done a good and a bad thing. For development, this is fine. I've created a global scope from command array, and then I can now look inside of the function and see what it has done. And this is key. This is key. This is what we wanted to see. Now, anytime I put any text in here, let me kind of zoom in here. The test command is being split based on these two on the space in between. So this is where you can change. Right now, we're doing kind of human readable split because humans use spaces to communicate. So you would use this as a space. You can also split based on dashes, slashes, ups, downs, whatever. You basically tell this uh, function, this method, how to split the string and what to look out for. You can use alphabetic values, you can use numerical values, basically whatever, but our logic here is this is a human entered command, and we want to basically split each piece of that command into multiple pieces or multiple array values. The arrays themselves are what's going to basically give us the organization we need to go into the next step. This is the next step. I've only created this little variable here to keep some details in. Probably not a good place to put it. Let's move this somewhere outside. Let's move this over here. Ooh, lots of space. We can make this global. It's just basically websites, right? Nothing crazy there. So from here, we can do a check to see what the first value of our command is. Recall, computers think from zeros starting point, not from one. Humans count from 1, 2, 3, 4. Computers count from 0, 1, 2, 3. With that in mind, we're basically just saying, hey, let's run it now right here. Check the first location of our array, which is our test key, right? So now we have a way to analyze the context of the user command based on those details. What I'm doing here is making it to lowercase. This is a typical just check because sometimes we have caps lock on, sometimes we like to work with or accidentally or use capitals. It's just a way for us to check exact matches. And here I've basically made an exact match for G lowercase, but I can also do this and then do command R0, then say that it's now uppercase. But instead of having extra code, one thing can be done in many different ways. I can just lowercase whatever input is coming in and just match it to this. Instead of having longer code, messier code, efficiency is key to maintaining order to your code and not having to do extra things. For the record, two up and down vertical lines is the or statement, basically saying, is this true or is this true? If one of those is true, then we do the code. The only time it runs is if both are false. So basically, if we don't type G in any way or form. But if both are true, still runs. If the lowercase g is true, still runs. Uppercase G still runs. That's just an extra step to the to lowercase adjustment. We're just taking whatever input we have, making it lowercase, so we don't have to do that extra set of code after and make our code look messier, basically. Here, I don't need this alert. This is just a pop-up, but let's test it out. Let's do an uppercase. Boom, activating Google. So now we see when we put in uppercase G, still matches with lowercase. We have an alert function. This is in JavaScript. Any of the the yellow based keywords you'll see here are just methods and functions that JavaScript gives to us. Some of these values like document, this is another thing that JavaScript gives to us to use at any time. It's actually a default document. It's if I put it in here and press enter, hold on. Oh right, I have the thing running there. If I put this in here and press enter, it's actually going to give us an exact copy of the full set of code for our document, including the JavaScript. This is a sense of self-awareness that JavaScript has, unlike certain languages like C++. C++ cannot analyze its own code. It compiles everything from the human-readable C++ language to assembly, which is essentially just a fancy way for zeros and ones to make sense, the machine learning of that all. And in JavaScript, however, it has kind of because it is a scripting language. This is the key. Scripting. It's not compiling. It's a interpreted language. It's running on the process of reading line by line and fulfilling actions. It's not going down to the machine level and compiling into bytecode like Java does, or C++ where it goes into assembly or assembling an application or basically just considering them zeros and ones that humans cannot read specifically. So we have this variable called document we can use on a whim. We also have window for the actual browser itself, which is interesting. You can actually control the browser itself. There's our alert function that we used over here. It's a part of that window. I can also do window dot alert. It'll achieve the exact same thing. Boom. But there's a shortcut. Oh, hello. Ah, okay. Yeah, we went to the actual page now. That's the next step in the analyzing. So, but window is us to basically control what the window is seeing. You can also track your mouse, which is kind of creepy. A lot of websites will track the mouse of a person using this window factor here. And basically, whenever you move your mouse out of the page and up here to that little URL bar and start clicking, you're leaving document for window, or documents actually, here, let's kind of get a good idea where the document is and what a window is. So this is document. It's just the page we're working on. This is the document variable. And then basically everything else, including up here, even like in our code down here, in our console down here, this is all gonna be window. So when basically a person codes their mouse to be detected by window, meaning that the user is going up here, boom, uh-oh, they want to leave the website. What are they gonna do? They pop up a big old discount. They say, hey, don't leave. Here's 80% off, bro. And then they make you want to click further and stay on the site. So this is a case scenario where your browser is self-aware about what part of the page your mouse is on. Is it in the document, looking around the page, or leaving to the window to change pages where then the developer can basically say, hey, don't leave, here's a discount. Sneaky, very sneaky. This is also why it's a bad thing in many cases, because a lot of malicious websites will use JavaScript for this particular case scenario too. They'll deactivate window components whenever you're moving your mouse up here. If your mouse is in the documents, they'll have that stupid Rick roll. Remember? I don't know if y'all seen that meme or where it came from, but when you have a Rick roll happening, it's just a window that flops around the page, and every time you move your mouse on top of that window, it disappears to another location. That's what happens. That particular troll is where your mouse goes from the desktop into your page and then it just teleports that page somewhere else by an X and Y coordinate so you can never click out of the Rick roll. This is the beginning of quote unquote hacking or really just being very annoying with scripts. So this is how we can use those to our advantages, both scripts within the window and document space. So here, I don't need this window dot. Keep in mind, window is a object, just like document. They both contain internal methods. For document, we're in the page itself, and there's a specific method. It's a function inside of an object. They call it a method. I repeat that multiple times because repetition is good. But in the end, is it different from a function? No, it's just a function inside of an object. It works the same way. So this function has an input, and you basically tell it, what am I looking for? What element are you looking for? What's the ID you're looking for? And it connects itself all the way up here to this ID, which is where our input space is. This is where the input's coming from. This is where all the details are basically passing through. The activator is simply a button that says press me. And onClick is a nice little function in HTML or attribute in HTML that lets us connect the action of clicking on click. And it connects to this function, which is where the beginning of our program really begins. We then begin the process. Grab the information from user input, split the actual user input information into this nice little. Ooh, okay. Oh my goodness. Let me refresh. I got messy. Split it into a array. Wait, I don't want to do that yet. So every space, it will make it into its own space in an array. All right, that's basically the key here. After that point, we use the first location, which is just that first piece here to test for a action. In our case, this is just a personal preference. And terminals, command prompts, all of those cases, you're looking for the first word that you're entering to be the command you wish to run. And this is the case here. We're considering the first thing we type in to be the command. In this case, G, and in our case, for actually Googling something. We have a list again of search sites here. The Google there, YouTube here. But these are just strings we're going to use to inject into our URL. Another way that malicious websites can redirect you without you knowing them by opening up a window in the background. Of course, we're not making malicious things here. We're basically learning how this works so we can be aware both as a programmer and learning basic programming to even growing out of just basics and understanding how people use it in both good and bad ways, right? Being able to understand something is a more powerful than basically going in blind. So command array uses the first index value. Let's see what that does again. Command ARR with the bracket 0 bracket. This gives me the first location in our array. That's what's happening right here. It's basically just showing, hey, it's test. And then it says, all right, let's make all of the letters too lowercase, which is already too lowercase, so nothing happens there. And then it asks the question, is it G greater than, or the command that we choose? You can choose anything, really. This is just my preference. You can do G colon, you can do G by itself, whatever. You can say Google outright, doesn't matter. Whatever you put in here is going to be the match that makes this a true statement. When that match happens, the code runs. And here, we just created an alert. We saw it. I don't need it anymore. This is from last time, just to show that it works. Using alerts to kind of test step-by-step progress is very important because it gives you the ability to check to make sure your code is working in progress. Not when you like write 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 lines of code and then decide, uh-oh, something doesn't work. So using those alerts is important, but eventually you can let them go. So we create a kind of more global, right? This is a global type of variable in reference to where we're going inside. In the same aspect that scopes and functions exist, for loops also have scopes. As soon as this loop is over, whatever variables that were created inside of the block of code get destroyed, saving memory. Important, very important to consider. So here I'm actually creating the search terms outside of the loop so I can keep them. I go through the loop, I go through each one of those search terms in command array. I'm also adding to a one case. I'm going beyond just the zero because zero we already tested for. The first index of the array we already tested for. So normally loop will start at zero here, but generally starting from the first case to the last case, but we already know the first zero is going to be the command, so we don't want that in our search. We simply want the I to start at 1, which is the terms after the search. So what is our search going to look like? It's going to be something like G and then uh, funny animals. So this is 0, and then there's 1, and then there's 2, as far as the computer reads it, right? We have three actual keys here, three indexes, but the computer doesn't read them as 1, 2, 3. It reads them as 0, 1, and 2. So we start at 1, that's the value that will be put inside of our command array. This is the power of variables and loops. Not a lot of people really get to feel the power of this. They just know they can do it, but they don't understand why we do it. Because we want to go through every single value in the array, everything. So from the funny to the animals. One line you could technically do in two or three or four, but you'd be stuck with those two, three, or fours statically. You will not be able to adjust to the amount of stuff that might be entered in here that go to the beach. You never know how many actual values are going to be placed inside of an input. So a for loop that can go dynamically based on the length of those commands, how many there are, loop through that length. Remember, the length here is this value here. This value is showing you there's three items inside. That's it. So we're using dot length right there to basically give ourselves a dynamically changing value that'll loop and loop and loop based on each unique command we press. And what we do really is we input that variable that is changing. I is incrementing. I plus plus just means when you get to the end of the loop, go from 1 to 2. Plus plus is just an increment of 1. When you get to uh, from 2 to the end of the 2 loop, then you add another for 3. When you get to the end of the 3 loop, you add another for 4, and so on and so forth. This is just an automatic increase by 1 every time you complete the block. That's it. And once you get to the very end, this is kind of the condition to stop looping. We use this to tell ourselves, all right, when we get to the value length of the amount of words, we're done. We don't want to go any further. We don't want to go to 10 to 20 to 50 if we only have 4 words that we're trying to analyze. And this is just the starting point of what value we want to begin at. There. So for the case scenario then, all we're doing is compiling each one of these search terms that are at the end here into a new variable called search terms. We're taking the previous value that existed in the very beginning, it's empty, but every time we run through the loop and we grab one of these words, funny gets put into search terms. So the first time we do this, got to think of it as a multi-loop process here. So let's say we say loop 1, it's going to be just this empty, and then plus command R, which if I really go into the details of what command R is going to be, it's just going to be funny. Like literally the first word, plus funny. So after the first loop is done, this compiles, this or concatenates as far as the string goes, and then saves itself into search terms. Now the second time the loop runs, you're going to have funny already in there because we already went through that first word. And then the plus for command R of the next value, which will be 2, means now we take animals and attach that here. Now, the only thing I haven't mentioned is this little extra plus here, the quotes and plus. Much different than this plus, right? This one is actually a string we are attaching at the end, so it'll basically be funny plus here, and then animals plus here. That little extra piece that we're adding on is for the fact that Google searches and uses spaces in the URL, but really it's not a space, it's a plus. We can't have spaces in the URL, so we have to adjust based on how Google searches, which is something we did last time in the session where we went to Google, we did a simple search, and then we took a look at the actual organization of the URL up here. And this is what it came out to be, right? So this is what we're replicating, but the plus in quotes is basically that plus. Right, so this funny plus here, funny plus is just me adding that extra plus at the end of the word so I can basically make it compatible with Google search mechanics. That's how they do it in the URL. There's no such thing as a space in the URL. It kind of breaks the URL overall. So we have to adjust symbols for spaces. In our case, that symbol is the plus here. That's why I have two pluses. The first plus that's white is a glue to attach and concatenate strings together. And then the second plus in orange is an actual string, a symbol, a letter that will be attached to the actual um, string value when we put it in here. And it'll look something like this. Oh, that's bad. I don't like that. Not erasing that right here. So funny plus parenthesis first part of the string, attach it. This is a plus outside of those quotes. Attached to animals with another little plus at the end there. And you just continually build a string that way. And you get your URL that you're basically trying to add on. So we're building that URL manually. Then we can attach it to search question mark q equals. Well, Google is using a variables page or a regular page here called search, and it's passing in a get request. Get request will be very useful in the future for any sort of PHP manipulation, any sort of PHP, MySQL. Those will be useful because we have two types of requests we do. We have get or put. And based on the type of request, it's either more safe and secure versus less safe and obvious. Up here is the get, and anything visible to the user up front obviously is not secure. So this is the get request that is not secure. But if we're just passing funny animals, why do we care about security for that factor? We're simply looking at the fact that I'm passing information to a page called search that exists on the server called www.google.com. And this search is expecting a get query of what we're searching for. And the variable is q. So we're using q as a variable in URL to store the information. And the page itself looks at q and says, all right, what does this person want to search? And then does the search mechanically in the background. That's what we're doing, at least building it through this loop. We're building our search terms. And finally, how do we open that page? Well, we don't need this console log anymore. But basically, window.open, you can manipulate the location that a user explores. You can change the page a person goes to with JavaScript. This is malicious and also good. It depends on how you use it, right? A tool is only as powerful as the user and only as, I guess, non-criminal as the user. We use tools for many things. You can take an axe, you can build a house, or you can take an axe and do something completely different with it, which is not legal. So the tools that we have are the things that we use, but the use itself is based on the individual. Here I can open up a window in the user's behalf and change it to a particular page. What I've done then is created the search sites variable right up here. I have Google in the zero location of the index, the very first location. That's why I'm calling Google for this case. And then I'm adding on the search terms at the end to populate that search that I'm looking for. That's what we did last time. So that was basically the review for this one. We can add other windows too, but we did a lot more details this time. So there it is. It opened up the page for me while still keeping my Stream Workbench available. It's still basically, oh, oh great, look, AI. Of course it's going to be AI. Oh, AI is ruining generations to come. I'm sorry, guys. I'm very sorry. AI slop is everywhere. Oh my God. Oh, geez. Okay, that I don't even know which one's real. Oh, that's not real. Anyway, that is how we can basically create a page that opens up other pages for us in a simple place. So now you can not only have Google set up, we can basically replicate this. For this session, we're going to recreate this process, but we're going to do YouTube, we're going to do Yahoo, we're going to do DuckDuckGo, and based on the keyword that you use, you're going to basically have that change of pace. And if you just come in, or you're coming in right now, make sure you go to the beginning of the video to see the full set of details and ask any questions. And of course, like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. I'm here to basically program, go into tech, go into AI, building computers, security, all kinds of little details that we can work with. A lot of web-based stuff, really. So now to go to the next step, we're going to take this if statement and continue it. Now there's two ways to do this. There's just me making a whole new one that's not connected to the previous one, right? So I've made it smaller here with this little piece there, but you're looking at this that we just saw. It's hidden. I can make a whole new if statement, but what this is going to do is going to make efficiency worse in our program. It's going to say, hey, I'm going to look through this, and then I'm going to look through this continuously. Even if I find Google, it's still going to check this over and over. So if we disconnect if statements, there's a specific usage for it that's nice. But for our case scenario, since we're dealing with the same task, trying to figure out what command the user is trying to plug, we're gonna combine them using the else if. The else if now states that if I find Google here, I'm not going to look in the next space. I'm just going to skip all the other else's because I found my location. And if I don't find Google, I'll check in the next. And then if I have another one underneath, I'll check in the next. And you can basically have as many as you'd like. But for us, we're starting off slow. So I'm going to use else because now it connects these two if statements together. I'm going to basically do the same thing as I did here. Copy that. We're just going to check for the command in the zero index location to lowercase, all that jazz. I'm going to put YT for YouTube. We're going to now make a quick reference for our workbench to go to YouTube and search that directly from our custom site. Then I go through the same process. I will have a search term. I will still go through everything, and then I will open the page up. This actually becomes a very important place. If I notice that I'm just about to do the same thing over and over, over and over and over, I know the only difference here is that I'm not going to Google, I'm going to YouTube. This is the only case that's different for this line of code. This is where a smart developer is going to say, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to just copy and paste this down here and then have a whole new set of 7, 8, 9 lines, right? If you know it, you know it, and you're about to answer it to yourself. This is a great time to make another function where I don't have to continuously copy and paste the same set of code over and over just to basically achieve a similar effect. If I see that I'm going to basically go through this over and over and over again, all I have to do really is just take this code, copy it, make a new function down here, call it parse input search, make it relative to what we're doing, paste the code in here, and we have this, but we do have to make sure we get the information out because the problem here is that we're in a whole different space. We're in a whole different piece of code. What's up, Vance? What's up, bro? Welcome in. So now let's learn about function usage. So far, we've only had button click and it hasn't input anything, nor has it returned anything. There's two keys to remember. Each function can input or output. If we leave those out, it's just going to run some code and be done. But for us, we want to return something because we're parsing some strings in our input and we basically get this little search term variable set up for us that we have to use later. But if I replace this whole section that I just copied in here with a parse input search, I need to return the search terms. They're in here now because really we're just going to delete this stuff. And now search terms doesn't exist anymore. Can remove this. Too many comments. Cleaning up a little bit. So search terms doesn't exist. We haven't actually parsed it or used it. So how do I do this from here? Well, first, we already know the code is here. We've copied and pasted it. We know it's going to do the same thing as we basically copied from. But now we have to do a return of that actual piece of detail. We have to return search terms in order for us to keep the information that this function has processed. Otherwise, it's lost in memory and will be deleted and so on and so forth. But now, how does that work? If you know algebra, remember a function changes based on the pieces you put in. So when you have a function that processes math, all of a sudden all the numbers combine into one number and then replaces where the function was. That's it. That's what's happening here. All of this code runs as a whole bunch of logic and math, or computer math really, and then replaces the location that we place this input search name. This is how logic works when it comes to the algebra aspect of mathematics and literally how programming works on a much broader scale. All it does is it acts as a variable that changes after the function is processed, which means search terms after we process it is going to come back in here and then boom into paste input search, which, or sorry, parse, which we're going to do right here. So parse input search is the function that carries that code now. We don't have an input, so we don't have to process anything. But I have to make sure now once it runs, it's going to get replaced with that array that it processes, the strings that we created here. So I have to save it so I can use it. And lo and behold, I just do the same thing, set it equal to a variable. So now it runs, it parses the string, it does the split, and then brings it back to search term, and then I can use it again. Anytime. I just new to tech and coding. I want to come to America for my master's in Texas. That sounds like a fun time, bro. I mean, what university are you looking for? What age group are you in? What is the current grade you're in? Because if you're learning now and you're starting fresh, good place to start and learn the logic here. It'll be much easier for any other language. I always talk about the particular case where I have this where's my tutoring stuff? Let's take a quick moment to kind of expand. Here's kind of the beginning code space. Since you're a beginner, here's what you need to know. Right. There's a 15% of all languages share this concept. All of it. Doesn't matter if it's Java, PHP, JavaScript, Lua, whatever. All 15% shares variables, functions, logic control, looping, and object. We're going over those. We're actually applying those to a realistic aspect too, not just teaching or learning about how they work. We're applying them to go through a string, loop through each word, save it into an array, and then have logic based on the command. Is it Google? Is it YouTube? What are we doing? And then storing those variables. So if you learn this with one language like you are here now, it's going to be the same way with the next language. We're learning JavaScript. You'll have the same experience with C++, Java, PHP, whatever, C Sharp. If you want to do game development, C Sharp and C++, what you're looking for. So the first 15% that you can learn very quickly is right here. And there's a relation to the logic between math and programming, variables, functions, and so on and so forth. But then the other 85% is over here. That's when you learn a specific API application. You are now done with the 15. You know how to use variables, loops, all the detail, at least on the medium to advanced level, right? And now you expand to the 85%. If you want to be a game developer, you're looking at Unity, C Sharp, C++, C Sharp, or GD script for Godot. These are the three main engines right now. Unity, Unreal, and Godot. At least Godot's making a big comeback now in the future. If you want to do data analyst, Python, R programming, etc. Apps, PHP, JavaScript, Python. Drivers, C++, Java, and C Sharp. Or assembly. But the case scenario is you learn the first 15%, then you focus, you hyper focus on one of these because you're not going to be able to learn all 85% of everything. If you're going to be a game developer, you're focusing on Unity, C Sharp, or Unreal, C Sharp, C++. You're not going to try and like in basically stuff your brain with stuff you're not going to use. But if you're making a multiplayer game, you might need to have game dev plus web dev. You might need to have a server that runs a Python system that can manage your system and connect two clients together. So there are some caveats to that, depending on how interactive your system is going to be. So first 15% is what we're going to focus for quite a bit, if not the whole time we're here, with JavaScript. We'll eventually go into Python if we need to, if we go into that demand a lot for AI development. But for this case, JavaScript's the easiest way to start and play around with stuff and get started. And that's why I love JavaScript. That's why I love the ability to give anyone the ability to make their own page and application. We'll eventually look at how we can grab weather online and all the details like that outside of it. Yeah. If you try to master everything, you'll be a what is it? Jack of all trades, but a master of none. Unless you want that, then you can have little bits of different things and really create random stuff, but you're never going to get to a certain point where you'll be going into like a corporation and actually applying every single thing you need to know. For game devs, physics, that's one thing. Normally Unreal, Unity, they built physics in their engine, so we don't have to worry about it. But what if you want to customize the physics to a very unique application, very unique game, a game that doesn't exist right now because everyone's using the same Unreal or Unity engine. They're replicating the same got Souls-like game mechanic. There's so many Souls-like games right now, it's because it's basically the default for Unity and Unreal. Creativity is dying because people are using tools other people created. Also, like and subscribe if you like my stuff. We'll continue on a daily normally. Sometimes I'll take a break because my ADHD goes all over the place. But so many of the same people that use Unity, they have little creativity, but I mean, come on, physics is not a it's not a class that everyone knows. It's not a subject people master. So of course we're going to use a tool that somebody else uses, and then replicate a different game with different attributes, different visual effects, but still looks like a Souls game, right? Souls-like game. But once you master physics and apply that to your own game engine, you could make something unique. And that's where the beauty of it comes in. In order to leave the patterns of the same games over and over, sometimes we need creative people to exist outside of the box that they're given, outside of the Unity box, outside of the Unreal box. The Godot's a perfect example. Godot itself doesn't give you a box. It doesn't give you C Sharp or C++. It gives you all three, including GD script. So you have a choice to use specific languages that it supports. So you don't have to be a master of the specific type that it makes you or forces you to. Anyway, first 15%, learn how the logic works. It's like the grammar. It's like algebra. If you don't know algebra, you can go into physics and statistics and all these extra higher classes that they would say is higher. And I've taught a lot of university kids, and in all due respect, it was not the class that was hard. It was not the calculus that was hard. Each student failed at algebra, which is the grammar of those subjects. So if you didn't do good in algebra back in high school, you're going to struggle with statistics. You're going to struggle with physics. You're going to struggle with all those details. And that's kind of the key, right? You got to know the grammar of a language before you can use it and understand the rest of the subjects involved. So, to expand on this, then, we're basically now just using that same pattern. Look, I don't have to copy and paste nothing anymore. I just use that function that is storing my information. A function that's very similar to how math uses functions too. Remember f of x that back in the day, f of x function? It's similar. We just have the ability to name f something more integral, like parse input search. And then it saves it to our search terms. Then we now just open the window, search sites, and now we're going to use one. We're doing a very primitive form here, to be honest, but hey, it's our own code, so we don't have to go crazy with it. I'm going to do a little bit of organization here to kind of get my arrays a little bit nicer. So now one, this is zero, right? This is our zero index. This is our one index. And now I can add other pages. Let's go to DuckDuckGo. I mean, let's test this out first, right? You always got to test and make sure. So now instead of zero for Google, we use one for the YouTube link. It's a little bit different. That's kind of the thing too. YouTube or Google again uses google.com as the server, and then search q equals, and then after q equals, we plug in the search terms. YouTube.com has the other page called results, and then search query equals, and then after search query equals, we plug in the search terms. So the format is similar. The only difference is that we just flip a 0 to a 1 so we can change between YouTube and Google. And that's the key is to see replicable formats. Oh, that's not good. Hold don't like this. There we go. That's nice. So replicable formats, just the page, the Q variable, and then the page and the other Q variable. So here again, the variable equals Q equals something, search query equals something. This is a design choice. Google decided to use Q as a single variable letter, and YouTube decided to use search query as a actual making sense type of variable name. So you have a choice on how to actually apply your variables. Now save this, refresh. Now I can go to G, funny animal things. Press me. There you are. Funny animals. And then the actual page is still open, so I can go back over here, change this to YT. Oh, look, now we're at YouTube looking at funny animal things. We're making our own little Workbench interface to basically go around the world in different formats. What if we wanted DuckDuckGo? Well, we need to go to duckduckgo.com, test out how their string and the URL looks like. Funny animal things. It looks like a question mark is the beginning of that particular case. Actually, no, it's not even. This is very ambiguous. Let's grab this real quick. Some things we don't need. So here's how it looks like. Got to make sure I put a comma after every single input to our array. And these are just comments so you can keep track of which value index is associated with which one of these. So, okay, Q. It uses the same thing as Google, actually. Yeah, actually like Google. We don't need this. And is a symbol for like a comma. It's basically separating variables. T equals H underscore. We don't need that. So we don't need the separator. And ampersand is basically separating the variable T from the variable Q. If I'm going to remove the T equals, because I don't actually need that, I'll take that down. And I don't need the end of this here. The and ampersand is just another separator. I'm not sure. Maybe just interface. It's trying to use metadata to keep track of how we're accessing the page. And this is the little thing that says, hey, they're coming from a web browser. And I don't want that. I don't care about that. But then here's the key where we need to adjust. We have our particular format, right? Q equals or search query equals. Well, we don't want to hard code our search. We created a system to do that for us. So I remove the actual search, keep this as the format, and now I go back down to my else ifs and create a new input. That's it. In fact, at this point, let's check how easy this is going to be. Else if, right? Now we're going to have DuckDuckGo is going to be DDG. I'm going to put this as still 0 there. And then I'll put this as 2. Done. Efficiency. This is how you code for a way that makes things make sense. Now I don't even have to go crazy. I took a little extra time, sure, to create this little search, but I don't have to copy and paste. I don't have to go through all the details and swap some signs and all this kind of stuff. I just have one function that parses the search terms from the input now that I've gotten the pattern. And normally this is how you're going to code. You're not going to make everything out of like the thought in your head, like, oh, I got to make this function here and this other one here and this other one here. You're just going to code it. And as soon as you realize, hey, I'm going to use this twice or three or maybe 5 times, I can make this a function. And then you go ahead and do that. And now instead of having this set of code that's about 10 lines long over and over, I'm just using one function name here, here, here. I've saved 27 lines of code for not copying and pasting. This is efficiency at its best. Why didn't we create a function for else if? That's another case scenario. We could, but if and else kind of gives us the general aspect. Like, if, and here's the case, right? We're gonna start getting wet. When we expand the functionality beyond just browsing the web, maybe next time we'll do more of a go online, use a fetch to grab the weather, right? Get some details about the weather and bring it back to us. When we expand the functionality from just being a hop to a search location, then I can take all of these and set them in a function that manages their own, the search command, right? The search command function, which you can do that. And then all I have to do is, well, in that case, then I have to catch all of these. So there's a way that we can do this. I made a more complicated one on my page, fathomcomputing.com. It just gets more complicated. You need to use an array for your commands then, and you'd have to search the array to make sure that it's a part of certain values that are search types that you can now run the search function, right? We would give G not only uh, the command itself, but then reference it as a search type. And if we're doing search type, then we run the search web command. If it's not, then we run the fetch weather command or the open hack map command or whatever. We just don't have that much interactivity yet, and we're kind of building it as we go. We're not gonna like foresight what we're trying to do because this expansion is gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep making this. There's no end point here. I'm just showing how to make a little workbench for anyone that can do on their actual spare time in their house right now with a browser and a notepad, right? Do this, you make yourself not only a tool you can access the internet with, but also learn how it works and then make it your own as you go forward. So technically, yes, we will in the future for sure put this into its own command. But at the moment, all we're really doing is just basically just, you know, parsing text to open up a search site, which is still useful, as a center point, having a command base that you can just keep doing this, create a new search. What else can we search for online, guys? I like to do stocks. So I'll go to something like Yahoo Finance. Do, 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 do. Now we can search here. And let's say I want to search Microsoft. Follow the same pattern. This one's a little different, actually. Quote Microsoft. In this case, well, I can still kind of apply a similar format to it. Instead of search terms, it's going to be a ticker. So if I wanted to do a type of search term factor, so then I'll do YF for Yahoo Finance. Then I will add that link to my array list, and that would be the value of 3, the reference to the index. I'll take away this, boom, and then I'll probably remove this too, and then I'll just attach it to the end here. Now, YF, now I got to change the actual index value for the Y finance that I just entered into my array, the 3, right? There it is, the 3. Save that and refresh. Now I can do Y finance and then let's say Apple. And didn't work. Okay. A little different. Lookup symbol plus. Oh, it's doing the plus thing. That was a bit of a problem here. All right. This plus thing now kind of gets in the way. Oh, that's a bit of a bummer. So now I have to make a particular case for this plus to not exist if we're at the very, very last value, which I'll probably do for next time. I think I'm kind of done for now. I got to get ready for a new student. And at least now we kind of got a good idea of how we can optimize code with functions, how they actually play a good part in our development and are making life easier when we're developers. Futuristically, we'll expand into grabbing weather online. We're going to increase the search sites. We're going to increase the action that our actual workbench can do. But right now, we've basically set it up to go to Google, do stuff, press. Oh, I forgot to do the listeners. Maybe I can do that one. Hmm. Maybe I'll do that later next time too. So instead of me pressing enter to go to actual pages, I have to press the button. Next time I'll actually introduce how to do the listeners so that when I press enter, it actually does it for me so I don't have to use that button. But for now, the button's gonna have to do. So now we have a little page that we can go and change this to different forms of our search process, open up a new tab for each of these different searches, and then go about our day with research. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you liked this video. I hope you like the programming process. I do encourage anyone to chat and give a comment underneath for anything you want to see in the future. And make sure you like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. I will do more of it, particularly anything tech really, but once in a while, I got a week of programming, then I got a week of computer building, and then I get a week of AI. It kind of goes based on what my fields are for that week. But right now, this week is going to be programming. We'll be doing this for a couple of sessions. So subscribe, hit the notifications to get notified when I'm online. Other than that,